Alright, I am back with another video, and today we're doing yet another remastered build, and it's one that I've been meaning to remaster for a while, the Fang of Tiamat. For those of you who don't know, who didn't see the original video, the Fang of Tiamat was one of my earlier, I suppose, deity builds, based on, well, Tiamat. Obviously. I use it as an opportunity to showcase one of my favourite builds in all of D&D, which is, you know, Sorlock. Draconic Sorlock to be specific at least. To be exist? What? Never mind. Anyways, so, and overall, I was quite happy with it. Although we did, now that we're kind of getting towards the end of the Deity Builds series, it did somewhat leave a kind of bad taste in my mouth going back to it. It's definitely the one that needed a remaster the most because it didn't really fit the vibe of the Deity Build series. I mean, the other one might be the Fist of Talos, but I think I might just do a completely different Talos build than that one to kind of better represent the deity. But that's for a video for another day. So what I kind of wanted to do with this version of the build was update the equipment a little bit. Because again, it's one of my older videos that didn't even have like early game equipment options. Update the kind of leveling scheme to include a level of Cleric so that we can get Tiamat related dialogue, as well as just making an overall slightly more solid build when it comes to spell choice, and just get, well, basically achieving the same goal and getting the same vibe, just an overall improvement. Not much has changed from the original build in terms of the basic concept, but the way it is executed has been altered, so I do think it is worth a remaster, as people have been asking for it, so here it is. So the basic idea of this build is to be a Draconic Sorlock, because Tiamat is both the Chromatic Evil Dragon Queen, as well as being basically kind of like a demon devil. No, demons are the abyss, devils are the hells. I have to remember. She's kind of like an archdevil in a way as well. So my idea was that to go with the kind of like Pact of the Fiend, Draconic Bloodline Sorlock, and I think it works pretty nicely. But I think I leaned a bit too hard into just the fire theming last time, whereas in reality we can do a lot more and create a much more powerful playstyle. So without further ado, let's get into it. Kicking things off, we are going to start as a Sorcerer. Sorcerer is going to give us access to a great starting kit, Constitution saving throws, which we love, as well as a bunch of cantrips and spells to get us started. It also allows me to use Draconic Bloodline Scales with a Dragonborn to create this awesome black and like fiery orange Dragonborn, which I love. One of my favourite things about the original Fang of Tiamat was the design, and I've updated it slightly here. They're not the exact same, but it's a bit more orange than red, but I still really love it. Anyways, like I said, Sorcerer, let's talk about it. First up, we're going to get access to 4 cantrips, and the whole point of Tiamat is that she has multiple heads doing multiple elements that chromatic dragons follow, so I've picked up most of them right at level 1. Firebolt is going to be one of our main damaging cantrips, which is going to do fire damage. Ray of Frost is a bit of cold damage with a little bit of battlefield control, reducing enemies' movement speed. Shocking Grasp is able to do lightning damage, works in melee, since we are going to be in both melee and in ranged combat with this build. It's nice to have another melee option, which is also going to have advantage on creatures with metal armor, and will prevent them from taking reactions by inflicting the Shocking Grasp condition. And also Acid Splash, allowing us to throw an AoE bubble of acid. It's basically just kind of getting to try the kind of main chromatic elements here. We could also pick up Poison Spray at this level, but we will have an opportunity to get this pretty quickly in a minute. Next up, our spells, and I think our spell choice here is quite obvious. Shield, one of the best spells in the game, can't go wrong with it, and Chromatic Orb, a one-stop shop for every element that we could possibly want to cast with a Tiamat build. Fire, cold, poison, lightning, thunder, it's all here. So in one spell we get access to everything we could possibly want, which is great. Of course, we're going with Draconic Bloodline, which is going to give us an extra hit point for every Sorcerer level we take, which for us is not going to be much because the max level is only 12 anyway, but hey, every little bit helps. As well as Draconic Resilience, meaning we basically get Mage Armour without the need to actually cast Mage Armour, which is always great. Whenever you multi-class without kind of spellcasters without actually being with a full spellcaster, because Warlocks work a little bit differently, you like to conserve as many spell slots as possible, so just having this, it fits with the build nicely, makes sense for the fact that we're playing a Dragonborn, and it makes us slightly more resource, better at resource managing, I guess. I don't know. There's a word for it. Resourceful, that's the word. We get to pick our Dragon Ancestor, and of course I am going to be sticking with the original build and going with a Fire Ancestry, in our case, red. The reason for this is because, well, we are going to be doing a lot of fire-related things, so being able to do, basically give our Charisma modifier to our fire attacks once we hit Sorcerer level 6, because spoilers, we do. I also have other ways of boosting up our damage from our other elemental attacks, which I think you guys are going to find really, really fun, so stick around for that. Of course, for our Draconic bloodline, I've decided to show the Ancestry. For some reason, it doesn't hide it here anymore, but you can see I've gone with... This isn't even the color I went with. This is a bug on the UI. Just ignore this. And next up, our ability scores. We've got a pretty standard spread here. In the original Fang of Tiamat, I believe I went with a 17 Charisma, telling you guys to bump that up with Ethel's Boon. Not doing that here because I actually wanted to put some points into other things. So let's get into it. Charisma is now at 16. Slightly less optimized if you really want to go, you know, all in on the Charisma. However, there is a reason for it that I'll get into in a minute. But of course, as you know, with Charisma, this is going to be our main attacking and spellcasting modifier. Dexterity is at 16. You can kind of choose if you want Dexterity or Constitution to be higher. I kind of like having more armor class, but if you get like certain pieces of heavy armor later in the game, because spoiler alert, we actually can wear heavy armor with this build. I keep saying spoiler alert, I should stop. You can actually maybe swap out that Dexterity for Constitution instead for better Constitution saving throws. I'm personally using a robe with this build. You'll see why, kind of in the similar theme to the original build. So I'm going to be going with higher Dexterity, but you can, if you decide to use armor with this build, you can swap that out for Constitution and play it a bit differently. As for our skill proficiencies, I went with the soldier background. I don't know why, that kind of felt like it makes sense to me, as we are going to be playing like a spell sword warrior type. So that is going to give us athletics and intimidation. Athletics, we've done to our strength, but this does patch it up a little bit. As well as intimidation being one of our social skills, we can just pick up deception and persuasion to follow up to become the face of the party, which is always nice. Now, next up at level 2, as per the rules of the Deity Build series, which this kind of is in the Deity Build series, but I'm going to make some special exceptions here and there, I usually do take the Cleric level as early as possible, in order to get the dialogue options, which if you're going for pure roleplay is what I recommend. However, you are going to be delaying some important features that we'll be getting from our other class, specifically Warlock, if you do this, so feel free to take this Cleric level whenever you like, whenever you think it's appropriate. I personally like taking it as early as possible because it is going to give us some utility, as well as the roleplay dialogue, so that is what I'm going to be showing off now. So here's the thing. With Cleric, we're going to get a few things. Obviously, cantrips. We're going to take the dialogue cantrips. We're going to get resistance, guidance, thaumaturgy. Cool. You can, even though our wisdom is a bit lower, you can pick up Produce Flame or Sacred Flame here if you want, because we are going to get ways to patch up our lower spell save DC and lower spell save attack rolls with wisdom spells later on in the build. So you can actually pick those up if you want, but I'm personally not going to be doing so, because I can't see a reason to use Produce Flame over Firebolt, unless you really want that blue fire effect, which I totally understand. But let's get into the subclass. The only domain that Tiamat has that is available to us in this game is Trickery. Trickery would get us the ability to give another creature advantage on stealth checks, it would give us Charm Person, and Disguise Self. As much as that is Tiamat's domain, I'm gonna, because this is technically not part of the Deity Build series proper, I'm going to bend the rules a little bit. Now, shout out to the person in the comment section of one of my, I think it was even the original Fang of Tiamat video, who predicted that I would remaster this build with a level of Tempest Domain. Tempest Domain, in my opinion, actually makes a ton of sense. It allows us to get kind of the lightning element of one of Tiamat's heads, giving us access to Thunder Wave as well as Fog Cloud, which again we can actually use, as you'll see when we get to the equipment section, as well as the Wrath of the Storm. As a reaction, we can strike back at an attacking creature, dealing 2 to 16 lightning damage or 2 to 16 thunder damage. The target takes half damage on a successful saving throw. Yes, our saving throws are not as high with our wisdom. However, again, we will have ways of patching this up later. And because we are going to be in melee combat as well as range combat, being able to retaliate with lightning or thunder damage, probably mostly lightning if we're sticking on the Tiamat theme, it actually felt extremely thematic. Not only that, Tempest Domain is also going to give us access to all martial weapons and heavy armor. So even though we're going to have Pact of the Blade here giving us proficiency in any weapon we choose, we are still going to have it even if we don't use our Pact weapon, which is nice. It means you can get a little bit of a start on the martial weapon stuff earlier than when you would normally get Pact of the Blade. And heavy armor is just a lovely thing to have, as it's going to give you way more flexibility in what you're able to equip. I've not specified a piece of heavy armor that requires heavy armor proficiency in the build today. But if you don't like the whole going with robes and having to manage your dexterity type deal, and you want to put points in the constitution or what have you, or even wisdom as well if you want that to be a bit higher, feel free to slap on a piece of heavy armor and move those stats around. I think it'll work out quite nicely for you. Of course, our deity is going to be Tiamat. Tiamat is the many-moored, that's an interesting name, is a rolling mass of avarice and hate currently trapped within the Nine Hells. The dragon god of greed eternally plots her escape, and so do many fanatics in the world of Toril. I'm guessing this character is a cult leader. Maybe from the cult that Will fought. Maybe there's some amnesty there. Ooh. Character stuff. Anyways, getting into the spells, we do actually get to pick 2 of them, and of course, you know the first one I'm going to pick is always Sanctuary. It is just one of the best utility spells in the game. Combine this with Shield to basically be invincible most of the time. In theory, in practice, it doesn't always work out that way, but Sanctuary can just give you the time you need to maybe reset some battlefield control, apply some buffs, do some healing, what have you. But the other thing that we're going to be taking, and this is actually a really cool part of the build that we didn't really get to do last time, is we're going to pick up Create or Destroy Water. Now, what Create or Destroy Water does is going to create water surfaces for us. Yes, this will make our enemies wet, which means they will be resistant to our fire damage attacks. But thanks to a Draconic Sorcerer's level 6 feature, which we'll be getting later, we won't have to worry so much about that resistance, as we will still be doing extra damage anyway, and we will have ways of getting rid of the wet condition pretty easily in order to get back to doing fire damage. But Create or Destroy Water is going to allow us to boost our ice and lightning damage alongside having our main features boosting our fire damage, as well as some equipment and such that again I'll get into later. So now we have ways of being able to switch up the element that we want to use depending on the situation, also giving us much more battlefield control. We can create ice surfaces or electrified surfaces to be able to inflict different effects on our enemies, knocking them prone on ice, and being able to use the electrocuted status, like I said earlier, with lightning, which can create a whole chain of events. Again, you'll see how this build plays. It's pretty cool. Next up, now, we're not going to take any more levels of Cleric, but if you do want to take level 2 of Cleric with this build, maybe sacrificing a level somewhere else, you could get Destructive Wrath for that maximum damage, but I'm personally not going to be doing that here, as I want features from our other classes. You could go up to level 6 of Sorcerer right away if you just want to focus on the spellcasting aspect, which is totally valid, but I want to get a little bit of spellcasting and a little bit of spell sorting, so let's go over to Warlock. Warlock is going to give us a bunch of great things. It's going to give us a couple of cantrips. You can absolutely take Eldritch Blast with this build. We're going to be sort of like a master of all cantrips, of like damaging cantrips with this build. I actually want to do like a cantrip master build someday, which just makes cantrips as powerful as they can. Maybe doing something like Eldritch Knight Fighter Wizard to just get as many different cantrips as possible and combine it with War Magic and some other cantrip boosting equipment just to like make them really powerful. I don't know. Let me know if you want to see that. But we can absolutely take Eldritch Blast on this build. It is basically going to be another option in our arsenal, as we will have ways to buff up our other cantrips as well to be on the same level as Eldritch Blast. So it's basically just another damage option for us. And as for your other cantrip, I'm going to pick up Poison Spray because that's another Tiamat element that we don't have yet. Of course, our subclass is going to be the Fiend. It makes the most sense for Tiamat. Again, she's trapped in the Hells, and she's kind of got a big thing going there. So her making Warlock packs and giving this Dragonborn her evil patron powers would definitely make sense. It allows us to pick up 2 spells in addition to getting our extra subclass feature, Dark One's Blessing, allowing us whenever we reduce a hostile creature to 0 hit points, we gain temporary hit points equal to our Charisma modifier, which is great. It gives us a bit more tankiness to work with in battle. But speaking of temporary hit points, we're going to pick up 2 spells here. We're going to pick up Armour of Agathis and Hellish Rebuke. Armour of Agathis, I cannot speak today, is going to give us 5 temporary hit points per spell slot level, and any creature that hits us with a melee attack is going to take 5 cold damage multiplied by spell slot level. Pretty awesome feature overall. A bit more tankiness, a bit of cold damage retaliation gives us a nice little bit of like a fire and ice thing going on, which is always fun. We already get Burning Hands thanks to our red Draconic ancestry, so we don't need to pick that up here, as well as we can also pick up Hellish Rebuke, a nice unique reaction based spell to allow us to counter with fire. So now we can counter with our reaction with Shield if we want to boost our AC, or if we get hit, we can now counter with Hellish Rebuke, dealing fire damage, or lightning or thunder damage with our Tempest Cleric feature. So we have a lot of ways of retaliating in combat. This is kind of a counter build as well, which is always fun. Next up, at Warlock level 2, we're going to get our extra Warlock spell slot, 2 invocations, and another spell. As for our spells, we can pick up Witch Bolt, giving us another chromatic element. I usually am not a fan of Witch Bolt, but we don't really have many other concentration spells at this point, and this is still a pretty decent lightning damage spell that'll work well in the early game with our Create or Destroy Water feature, so it's a nice thing to pick up and just deal a bit of lightning damage every turn while you're kind of Eldritch Blasting or Fire Bolting or what have you. As for Eldritch Invocations, you can kind of pick up whatever you like here. I am going to be grabbing Devil's Sight because we can absolutely do Darkness Devil's Sight shenanigans with this build, so I want to be able to do that. And Dragonborns don't naturally get Dark Vision for some reason, so let's get the best Dark Vision there is. We might as well also pick up Agonizing Blast in order to get that extra bit of damage on our Eldritch Blasts, but you don't have to pick this. Again, we will have ways of bumping up Eldritch Blast and our other cantrips regardless. You might feel like this is overkill, and instead you can take anything else. You want to speak to animals, do that. You don't need Armour Shadows. You can pick up Beguiling Influence if you want to maybe get other skill proficiencies at the start of your character. Fiendish Vigor we don't need because we get temp HP from multiple different sources. Disguise Self could be good. One with Shadows could be something. Repelling Blast could actually be a nice little utility option as well. And Fee for 5 Face gives you Bane. I mean, yeah, Agonizing Blast is our best option here, really, but there's other options. You can use them. I was going to say something else, but honestly, yeah, you can just kind of use them. Anyways, next up, level 2 spells, and of course, Scorching Ray. Big fire damage spell. As well as our Pact Boon, and you already know it, we're going Pact to the Blade to allow us to use our weapon attacks with our Charisma modifier, as well as being able to summon Pact weapons. We probably won't ever be using that, but we definitely want to be able to attack with our Charisma. At Warlock level 4, we're going to get some extra stuff. Another cantrip, let's grab Friends. Another spell, let's pick up Darkness. There is another elemental spell here, that being Shatter, but Thunder is one of Tiamat's heads. I'm fairly certain, so we don't actually need to pick that one up here. But there are other options here if you'd like. Hold Person is great, Crown of Badness is great, Cloud of Daggers is great, Misty Step is amazing, Mirror Image is pretty good. Feel free to pick up whatever you like here, but I'm going with Darkness because we're playing a Draconic Sorlock. Let's just go all in on the shenanigans that Warlock can provide. We're also going to be picking up an ability score improvement at this point and bumping up that Charisma to an 18 since it feels almost everything we do. Next up at Warlock level 5, we're going to get our Deepened Pact feature, which means now, as a Pact to the Blade, we get extra attack. Perfect, we're now a full martial fighter. We also now get access to level 3 spells, and there are a couple of spells I want to pick up here. Let's grab Fireball. Obviously, we want our big fire damage spell, and anything that we don't have to pick up on our Sorcerer spell list is great, so that gives us more variety on that side of things. So, we're going to be picking up Fireball here for a big dollop of fire damage. We're also going to be replacing a spell. I'm probably going to take away Witch Bolt at this point, because we now have good concentration options, and instead I'm going to be throwing on Hunger of Hadar, or Hadar. Hunger of Hadar or Hunger of Hadar? Let me know. Hunger of Hadar is going to give us both cold and acid damage in a single attack, also blinding our enemies as well, which Devil's Sight will allow us to kind of bypass, meaning that now we can deal 2 Chromatic of Tiamat's elements at once with a single spell. Don't know why I didn't pick this up in the original build, I'm a bit of an idiot. As for our Eldritch Invocations, we do get another one, and I'm going to pick up Mire the Mind for slow, because it is just one of the best kind of spells in the game. I've really come around on this. I actually prefer slow to haste now. I know why people like haste, because it makes your character feel powerful, but this makes the whole party feel powerful. Love it. And we're not going to be going to level 6 of Warlock, because while we could get Dark One's Own Luck and another level 3 spell from this list, we don't really need to, and we'd be missing out on other features if we did. So let's go back over to Sorcerer for the rest of our levels. At this level, we are going to get Meta Magic, so we're going to be picking up Careful Spell, which means since we have a lot of big blast spells, we can guarantee that our allies aren't going to be taking too much damage. However, if you wanted to grab Distant or Extended, you absolutely could. We're also going to be picking up Twinned Spell as well, because being able to target multiple people with a single spell is always great. Next up, we do get to choose another spell here, and I'm going to be picking up Ice Knife to give us a cold damage attack. Next up, at Sorcerer level 3, we're going to get access to more meta magic options, and you already know what we're taking Quicken Spell. Not exactly breaking new ground with build creativity here, but that was the whole point of the original build as well, was just to make a powerful build that uses the best of both classes in a fun and thematic way. And I personally think this still works really great for us, so I'm not going to change the formula too much. We also do get to add another spell to our spell list, and now we have quite a lot of options since we've picked up most of what we want already. So I would actually say let's grab another chromatic element in the form of Ray of Sickness, giving us another poison damage option. Next up, we also have level 4 of Sorcerer, giving us access to another cantrip. We might as well round out our damage types and pick up Bone Chill. Next up, we do also get to pick another spell, and I guess we can pick up Witch Bolt here again now for another lightning option, since we don't have access to lightning bolts just yet. But if you want to pick up something else that's a bit more utility-based, you absolutely can. We also do get to pick up another ability score improvement, and of course, we're maxing out that Charisma. At Sorcerer level 5, we get to pick up our level 3 spells, and of course, I'm grabbing Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt is going to be a big damage attack for us, especially when we make our enemies vulnerable to our lightning and cold damage through making them wet with Create Water. So Lightning Bolt and our ice spells like, Ice Knife are going to deal a lot of damage, and Lightning Bolt is actually going to be one of our most damaging options in addition to Fireball, which is great. If you wanted to replace Witch Bolt at this level as well, if you don't feel like you want to keep that around, you could, but I'll keep it around here for the sake of kind of keeping on theme. But again, there's other spell options here. Counterspell, always good. You know, Sleet Storm would also be on theme here, but it's not a direct damaging spell, so I'm not going to take it here, but it's entirely up to you kind of what you want to go with. And finally, at Sorcerer level 6, we're going to get access to our Elemental Affinity damage, allowing us to add our Charisma modifier to the damage associated with our Draconic ancestry, in this case, Fire. So things like Firebolt and Fireball are now going to do even more damage. We also get Elemental Affinity Resistance, allowing us to, whenever we cast fire spells, spend a sorcery point to gain resistance to fire. Don't ever do this. In fact, turn off this reaction as soon as you get it in your hotbar. Next up, we do get another spell at this level, and it's entirely up to you what you want to pick here. It really doesn't matter at this point. We kind of got everything that we could possibly want from this build that we are going to get, because unfortunately we're not going to get to level 4 spells, so we could just pick up Counterspell, because Counterspell is always useful, although our build is a bit reaction heavy, so maybe Sleet Storm might be more your jam. In fact, that's probably what I'm going to choose. And that is the build. What you're getting out of this is second verse, same as the first. You're getting a Draconic Sorlock, now with a little bit of Tempest Cleric in there. You're going to have the ability to use Charisma for pretty much everything, as well as being able to have a wide array of damage types and battlefield control. Hunger of Hadar, Darkness, Lightning Bolt, Sleet Storm, Scorching Ray, Eldritch Blast, any of the cantrips. You get a bit of tankiness, thanks to Dark One's Blessing mixed with Armour of Agathis, giving you temporary hit points in many different ways. You have access to just so many different things. You have access to Utility, Create Water, allowing you to make your attacks deal even more damage, Sanctuary to keep yourself safe, those cleric levels are really coming in, and again you have a ton of retaliatory moves using a reaction, Shield, Hellish Rebuke, our retaliating Call of the Storm, Wrath of the Storm, that's what it's called. You got a bunch of cool stuff to really make this build feel like a spell-slinging, axe-swinging, big old murdering Tiamat Dragonborn. It's going to be a ton of fun. Draconic Sorlock is one of my favourite playstyles overall. I just love the theming of kind of like dragons mixed with warlocks. Like the fact that we didn't get a proper like dragon patron warlock still hurts me to this day, but I mean that's what Homebrew's for, right? So let's get into the equipment. First up, you will notice there's a lot of stuff here, because actually there's a lot of different equipment options you can go with in this build. I personally feel like there's multiple different playstyles that you could actually take here. If you want to focus purely on like melee damage, we have options for that. We've got options for ranged, and we've got options for spreading a lot of status conditions. The stuff that I have here is what I found to kind of be the most fun and unique to play, but there are more straightforward options if you want to go down that route, so let's get into it. First up, let's talk about weapons. I've got the Hellfire Great Axe, boosted with the Drakethroat Glaive to give us an extra d4 of lightning damage and another +1 here. This is basically just a big fire damage weapon from the end game, an extra d6 of fire, plus the regular axe damage of a d12 +8 thanks to our charisma modifier. It comes with all the goodies that we want. Usually when I make Pact of the Fiend builds, I'm rocking this weapon, and that doesn't change here. And we also get to play with the heat mechanic as well, which is always nice. And we also gain access to Hellflame Cleave as well, which ignores resistance and immunity to fire damage, so we just get a massive attack, which is great. But if you want some other options for the early game, the Everburn Blade is what I used in the original build, and I still actually think it's good here. It's actually solid enough, especially with a Drakethroat Glaive buff, to go all the way to the end game. I mean, having a flaming friggin' sword that also can do like lightning or cold or acid or whatever you want from it is just friggin' badass, but the Hellfire Great Axe is just a straight up upgrade over it. However, I actually do think the Drakethroat Glaive on its own would be a spectacular weapon for this build. You'd gain access to augmented breath weapon, meaning that enemies have disadvantage on the saving throws. I've got an acid breath here, which does 4d6 acid damage once per short rest, but you could totally go with any Dragonborn you like and get anything, any sort of buff you want out of this. As well as it would give you Draconic Elemental Weapon, which you could use on the Drakethroat Glaive to make it its own kind of mega buffed weapon, a +3 glaive with an extra d4 of whatever element you choose. Overall, as unfortunate as it is, I think the Hellfire Great Axe is the strongest option, because the heat mechanic also helps us boost up our fire attacks even further. So in my opinion, I do think the Hellfire Great Axe is your best option, but you've got a solid bevy of options as you move up the game. You can go with the Everburn Blade first, then whatever you use the Drakethroat Glaive for buffing or for just using it on its own in Act 2, and then pick this up in Act 3 and buff it with the Drakethroat Glaive for maximum damage. The reason I've gone with lightning here as well is because this means that no matter what we attack, if we attack with this weapon or not, if our enemies are wet or not, it's not going to matter, because even if our fire damage on this weapon gets resisted, our lightning damage will get doubled. So we've kind of managed to overcome the kind of, you know, chicanery that comes with making enemies wet while trying to use both fire and lightning, because we just do both really, really well. So I think this is kind of the best setup for this build. Let me know what you think in the comments. Next up, our ranged weapon. Of course, I'm throwing the Darkfire Shortbow on this build. Giving us resistance to fire and cold damage without any sort of like restriction is perfect for this build. As you can see over there, we have 4 resistances: acid, fire, lightning, cold. If we manage to get poison resistance on this build somehow, we'd literally have the full Tiamat set. It's a shame I didn't do that somehow. I probably could have figured out a way to do it. I believe there is a ring of poison resistance in this game, but I really wanted to use the rings that I actually have here. But if you wanted to throw the ring of poison resistance on and have 5 resistances, you absolutely can. But I think there's also an elixir of poison resistance too, so you can just go with that if you really desperately wanted to optimize this build. But let's get into the rest of the equipment. First off, the Hat of Fire Acuity. Whenever you deal fire damage, you gain Arcane Acuity for 2 turns. Arcane Acuity is going to increase your spell attack rolls and spell difficulty class for each remaining turn. This means that no matter where our spells are coming from, even from Cleric, we're going to have higher chances to hit. Now, there's another way of doing this. You could go with the Hat of Storm Science Power, which would do the same thing but with thunder damage, or you could go for the Helmet of Arcane Acuity, which does it with weapon attacks, which obviously we will be doing. But since we do fire damage on pretty much everything we do, both our spells and our weapon attacks, I think you're going to get the most acuity, like Arcane Acuity bonus from this one. Maybe if the Hat of Storm Science Power works with like reverberation ticks, which I'm not sure if it does. I'll have to test that a bit further. That might be more optimal, but I think if anybody wants to let me know in the comments if that actually does work, please do. But the Hat of Fire Acuity I think is the most solid option that I know works from my testing, so I would go with this to bump up all of our spell save DCs and attack rolls, basically guaranteeing we're going to be able to get off our most damaging effects. However, if that's not really your bag and you just want to say, I want cool abilities, then go for the Helldusk Helmet. When you get up to Act 3, this will allow you to basically replace your Devil Sight invocation, because this would give you this will make you immune to blinded and give you dark vision up to 12 meters, so you could get rid of Devil Sight for something else. You'd have a +2 bonus to saving throws against spells, attacks cannot land crits against you, and you get an extra Hellish Fire ability and Eliminating Gaze, allowing you to deal fire damage and frighten enemies. I personally prefer the Hat of Fire Acuity just because it feels more interesting to me and it augments the playstyle in fun ways, but of course, that's an Act 3 option for you. I've gone with the Cloak of Protection just to bump up our AC a little bit with the strategy that I have, but again, if you go with heavy armor or whatever on this build, then you won't really need this. You can swap this out for maybe the Cindermoth Cloak to be able to inflict burning on those who would melee attack you, so that's an option for you. But with the Cloak of Protection and my setup that we have here, we have a pretty solid 18 AC. Next up, for our robes, of course, I've gone with the Potent Robe, because it's coloured in furnace, red and black, like everything I'm showing off here, and it looks badass on this build. The Potent Robe is going to allow our cantrips to deal additional damage equal to our Charisma modifier, basically giving Agonizing Blast to every cantrip we have, as well as basically doubling our Agonizing Blast on our Eldritch Blast. It's the Warlock Robe, there's just nothing else to it. As well as we also gain temporary hit points equal to our Charisma modifier at the start of every turn. So that's Armour of Agathis, Dark One's Blessing, and this robe giving us temporary hit points all the time, making us extremely tanky. Plus a +1 bonus to our armor class. Always great. However, I will quickly show off a couple more options here. Obviously, if you're playing a Cleric of Tiamat, a Chosen of Tiamat, your build's probably evil. And in the original video, I did showcase the Infernal robe as an option. Lots of people don't like getting this robe, because despite how cool it is giving you access to Fire Shield, resistance to fire damage, and a point of armor class, and Fire Shield would be really nice to have on this build, it does require killing Karlach to get. And obviously a lot of people, even on an evil character, aren't exactly vibing with that. But then again, if you're playing an evil character, Karlach's going to betray you as soon as you go kill the Druid Grove anyway. So in my opinion, I would also use this one, but I think if you're going for like this kind of Master of all Cantrips playstyle, you're definitely going to want the Potent Robe anyway, so it's whatever. Basically, the Infernal Robe or the Potent Robe are definitely what I would use, and the Infernal Robe looks awesome, and there's very few times when most players would actually get to use it, because again, they don't want to kill Karlach to get it. So I think the Potent Robe is going to be the more generalized option, but the Infernal Robe would definitely be a nice option as well. But of course, when you get into Act 3, and if again you want something that's going to feel on theme, grab the Hell Dusk Armor. Now, a lot of people always tell me to, oh, why didn't you use the Hell Dusk Armor? Why didn't you suggest the Hell Dusk Armor? It would make so much sense to use the Hell Dusk Armor. You get it for beating the game's super boss. By the time you've beaten the boss that you get this from, your game is already over. There's no point in me recommending it in builds. Like, ever. However, there is a way to get this earlier. Spoilers in 3, 2, 1. In Act 1, Raphael can appear at your camp. There's a multitude of steps you've got to take to guarantee that this will happen. Basically, you have to engage Raphael in his dialogue outside of camp, and then have another party member that was not pulled into the dialogue separate from you attack him so he disappears. He will then reappear at your camp later. Then you've got to do the exact same thing. Have someone engage in dialogue with him, then have a character that doesn't get pulled into the dialogue attack him repeatedly with non-lethal damage. When he goes down, he's knocked out, and you can loot the armor off of him. That's probably missing some steps here or there, but if you just Google the method, you'll find out pretty easily. This could get patched, and will most likely get patched in the future though, so don't hold your breath. But if you want a final endgame armor that's going to work nicely for this build and kind of feel thematic, then you can absolutely go with this. You're considered proficient while wearing it, so you didn't actually need heavy armor proficiency to get this, but you can totally still use other heavy armor if you like. Whenever you succeed a saving throw, the caster receives burning, you have resistance to fire damage and cannot be burned, and you take 3 less damage from all sources, and you can cast Fly. Goes with a whopping 21 AC, giving us a total of 22 with the Cloak of Protection. It's a pretty good armor. Thought I would suggest it since people keep asking me why don't you suggest it. This because you're never really going to get much of a use out of it, because by the time you get it, it's game over. So, back to the Potent Robe, as that is my kind of clothing of choice. Next up, the Gloves of Belligerent Skies. This is where the build is really starting to change. Whenever we deal thunder, lightning, or radiant damage, we inflict reverberation. All of you know what reverberation does at this point. It's a stacking effect that you stack multiple times, and when you get enough stacks, the enemy takes thunder damage and falls prone, and then you can cycle it over and over if you keep triggering these gloves. Now, because we now have access to lightning damage and thunder and electrocuting with water and all this and that, we basically can get reverberation going up constantly, which is extremely powerful for us. So being able to give ourselves heat, inflict reverberation, inflict electrocuted, we're going to have a ton of different ways to manipulate out the battlefield with tons of different status effects, and just deal a ton of damage. Reverberation is going to be extremely strong. And it's really great when combined with the water sparklers. Again, another big change from the original build. Whenever we stand on water during combat, it becomes electrified, so automatically, just for standing on the water surfaces we create, we're going to get our enemies electrocuted, as well as being able to gain lightning charges by standing on these electrified surfaces, giving us a +1 to attack rolls and dealing an additional 1 lightning damage. And if we have 5 charges, we can consume them all to deal a big dollop of lightning damage on our next attack. Like, it's just even more power. This has kind of turned into a fire, lightning, thunder build with a bit of cold in there too, and I am totally down for that. Basically, combining all of these features together means we're going to be inflicting electrocuted, fire, lightning, reverberation, thunder. We're just going to be able to do it all, and you will have seen in the combat footage that electrocution can proc reverberation over and over and over again and just be absolutely devastating, which is why I say if the Heart of Storm Science power gives you more arcane acuity on reverberation ticks, you could max out that shit pretty much immediately. Again, I should have tested that, but I'm on kind of a time crunch to get this video done as it is, so I didn't really have time. So, and then next up we'll get into the accessories before I kind of discuss the alternate options here. Next up, we have the Necklace of Elemental Augmentation. Whenever one of our cantrips deals Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning, or Thunder, we can add our spellcasting modifier to the damage dealt. I think I've mentioned this before, but curiously, this mentioned cantrips that deal Thunder damage. There are no cantrips that deal Thunder damage in this game, so that's kind of funny. But this is just another layer of adding our Charisma modifier to our cantrips even further, meaning that all of our cantrips are going to be extremely strong at this point. Speaking of, we also have the Ring of Arcane Synergy, allowing us to, whenever we deal damage with a cantrip, we gain Arcane Synergy for 2 turns. Arcane Synergy adds our spellcasting modifier as damage to our weapon attacks, making this whole spell sword playstyle very much worth it. Now, on the original build, I had these 2 pieces of equipment as well as the Ring of Elemental Infusion, which whenever we use one of our elemental cantrips, we would infuse our weapon with a d4 of that element, which we could attack with, which we could use on our next attack, but then it went away. I've changed that out for the Sparks Wall, because that extra d4 damage isn't really going to matter too much when we are already stacking so many different damage types already, just kind of overkill. So I've decided to go for this, meaning that we cannot be electrocuted by our own electrified surfaces that we'll be creating, and we get that lightning damage resistance, which just feels amazing for this build. So I think it's a more powerful option for us here, again being immune to our status effect that we're going to be kind of relying on as one of our playstyles for this build is really, really good. So I think overall this kind of kit that I have here is extremely powerful. But let's go over some alternate options for gloves and boots here. If you want to use the Hell Dust gloves from Act 3, you'd get a bonus to your spell attack rolls and spell save DC, which is great, and all of your weapon attacks would deal an additional 1 to 6 fire damage. That's just more damage on top. You also get the Rays of Fire ability or cantrip, which is basically just Scorching Ray on steroids once per short rest. We also have the Daredevil gloves, which were on the original build, which will allow you to make your ranged spell attacks as melee attacks even when you're next to a hostile creature, meaning you don't have to worry about spacing, so you can go in, attack with your weapon, and then use a cantrip as well without having to think about your distance. However, we do have things like Shocking Grasp as melee cantrips now that we are probably going to want to be going for if the enemy's wet, so that's not a huge deal anymore, but it's still an option there if you want to use it. As for the boots, we have the Boots of Stormy Clamor. We inflict a lot of the conditions like electrocuted on our enemies, so we can stack even more reverberation to get those reverberation cycles going through faster. We also have the Hell Dusk Boots, which will allow us to ignore difficult terrain, meaning that we wouldn't slip on our own ice. Once per long rest, we can automatically make our saving throw against any saving throw. We can just automatically succeed once per long rest, as well as gain the Hell Crawler ability, which is basically Misty Step with a fiery explosion that does also hurt us, but we have fire resistance, so it's not a huge deal. And finally, we also have the Bone Spike Boots. In the original video, I used the Evasive Shoes, and if you're going with heavy armor, you can still use those if you want, just to get that buff to your AC. However, the Bone Spike Boots are basically going to do that as well, while also giving us a bump to our saving throws, and our jump distance is increased as well. We also get Brutal Leap, which can weaponize our jump to knock enemies prone. This is just basically kind of like an upgrade if you're going with kind of like the outfit layout that I have here. If you kind of wanted to go along that route. So yeah, that's like if you want to stay closer to the original build, you could go with the Bone Spike Boots instead with this setup. But yeah, that is the build. As I said, everything is coated in black and furnace red dye, so we get this badass, awesome Dragonborn look that we have here. But yeah, I mean, as you'll see in the combat footage, this build shreds. We immediately are able to use Create or Destroy Water to make 2 enemies vulnerable, and then we just destroy them both immediately with lightning bolts, taking them out of the encounter immediately, and then it's just a matter of whittling down the Steel Watcher with our immense battlefield control and damage dealing capabilities, creating a electrified water surface under a darkness cloud, basically making the Steel Watcher completely useless as we blast it over and over again and attack it with our weapon. I mean, you could just see how powerful this build actually is. It does come with some caveats, though. We do have slightly lower AC overall without using the heavy armor, so we are a bit squishy if we do get hit. But thanks to darkness and shield and all of that good stuff, we don't have to worry about that as much. However, when we do get hit, we are more likely to break concentration, and we do have a lower HP pool, so you do need to be careful. This build isn't necessarily about being able to tank hits, rather than it's about being able to avoid being hit altogether, and it does that very well. Most AI enemies won't want to step into the electrified surface or the darkness cloud that you create if they can help it, and if they do, they're only going to suffer for it. And again, running this as part of a team is absolutely devastating, so I absolutely recommend giving this a try. Quicken Spell is godlike on this build. Attacking and blasting and battlefield controlling basically all in one turn can be extremely good. So yeah, I mean, overall, I'm really happy with this. It's not as much of a massive change compared to some of the other remastered builds I've done. I definitely think the Dancer of Ylustrai Remastered, the Devil Slay Remastered, and the Sonic Warrior Remastered, they all kind of got more changes than this build. Basically, the biggest change of this build was leaning more into using multiple elements in a single playstyle rather than focusing on just fire, and obviously throwing the Cleric level in there for that utility, and it's definitely worth the utility, I absolutely think. Yes, technically we're losing out on the level 4 spells, which the original build did like having, like Ice Storm, and Wall of Fire and such like that, but I think with this, I like this more. I do think this is an improvement on the original build. I think it is a more powerful build. I think it has more themes to it. And again, just getting that Tiamat dialogue is so valuable. I don't know why I didn't focus on that before. I mean, I had already been doing 1-level dips of Cleric in the Deity Build series at that point, so there was no real excuse. I was still new to the YouTube thing back then. Hell, I'm still technically new to it now. This is still my first year. But, you know, what have you. I mean... I don't even know where I'm really going with this, but you know what? I like this build. I think it's an improvement on the original, and I think you guys will enjoy using it, so have at it. As for end of video stuff, there's not too much to discuss. The combat footage is pretty quick this time around, so I'm not really going to have much time to say anything, so I guess I'll just say thank you for watching, thank you for your support. We're really hitting that, we're getting close to 10k now. Like, really close. I think we're about 9,300 as this video goes up, which means that we're going to approach it soon, and I've got to start thinking about what to do for 10k subscribers. A face reveal was something I discussed before, but it's kind of been controversial. Like, people are like, no, we don't actually want to know what you look like, we kind of like the mystery, but then other people are like, yes, please do it. But I don't know. I don't know if that would be appropriate. Maybe a big live stream of some kind? Maybe like a channel retrospective? I don't know. I'm really stuck as to what to do for 10k, so if you have any ideas, let me know. But either way, I think I'll just let this video fade out to black. See, it's doing it right now. The video is very slowly fading to black, as it always does at the end of my videos. Usually the fade out is really short, but today it's really long. You see, I'm slowly disappearing. My voice is starting to get quieter and quieter. You're not even going to hear my regular outro this time unless you really listen for it. So, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.